I became a filmmaker because I love reading stories about wonderful characters, about young girls and women facing pivotal moments in their lives. And at the time, this was like 35 years ago, so it's like I want to see characters up there that I've created, like the characters in the books that I've read. I want to see them. And so I guess I'm going to have to do it. And so then I started working as a filmmaker, writing and directing. Through music, through poetry, to listening to people sitting around in restaurants or on the subway or on a bus or just standing around or in class. Ideas are just floating all over the place, and I think everyone has something to say. It's just like writing a little poem or singing a song. A film voice is something that we all have.
So you don't have to go to Afghanistan to get story ideas. They are in your backyard. And I can absolutely guarantee you that you have many stories in your school that you don't know about. So maybe it's the girl sitting next to you. Maybe she doesn't have a sense of smell. Or maybe it's the kid who sits in the back of the class. Maybe he had a life or death experience. This American Life did this one fantastic story about a 12-year-old boy who didn't believe in love. And they spent like 10 minutes on this boy just trying to figure out why he didn't believe in love. And it was one of the most magical stories I've ever heard. So just keep your eyes open and your antenna up.
We have some good storytellers. I mean, our grandmothers, and I just left Alabama. I went down, my daddy is buried in Madison, Alabama. I go back to Alabama as much as I can because that truly is my home, where I feel like I'm really in a place where my daddy was born there, and that's where my roots are. And I go there because I go there to hear the stories. My Aunt Dookie, I go in and she starts telling stories as soon as I walk in the door about how my daddy used to take money and bury it in jars in the dirt, you know, and save it, and that was his bank, you know, just these crazy stories that make us human, you know, and make us laugh. And so the most honest stories, the funniest stories, the stories that are just outrageous are the best. And so I go down south to get some of those stories and to find my poems there. Because in New York City as well, though, when I was in New York, there were stories everywhere. I would get on the train, I would just see, like, you know, a little Chinese woman with her son or her daughter headed to wherever she's going. She's got bags. I pay attention to the kind of bag someone has, or see what they're wearing, what kind of shoes. You know, you're always trying to figure out, I'm always trying to figure out, where are they coming from and where are they going? And I see a little girl, you know, she's got her hair all done and she's got her phone and got headphones on. And I'm just like, you know, always trying to figure out what is their inspiration, what is their destination. And so I've made up a lot of stories about people that I've just seen, strangers, you know, and that's the part of the kind of the thing you can do as a writer is you can create characters. Like Walter Mosley can create these great characters. And so, yeah, I mean, so storytelling starts with a good subject matter. But people are so hilarious. You know, human beings are, you know, and kids are great subject matter. But I think you have to, like, sometimes just go back to, like, where you're from, like those grandmothers and those aunties. We have to, like, get back to, like, sitting up under our elders and listening to them talk. And that's where you'll find some of your greatest art. Some of your greatest stories. It's just listening to them go. So, I mean, so that's for me. And I'm not a character actress. So when I'm telling people stories, it's usually in my own voice. I am really into telling the stories of women whose stories aren't being told. A poem that I wrote recently was for Naima, Naima is one of John Coltrane's biggest songs. Everyone knows Naima, but they don't know Naima the woman. So I wrote a piece for Naima the woman because I was trying to find her online. I couldn't find her. I wrote a solo theater show. One of my plays was at the Here Theater off Broadway in New York City called There Are No Asylums for the Real Crazy Women. And it's dedicated to Vivian Elliott, who was married to T.S. Eliot. So T.S. Eliot's work, which I've loved and studied my whole life, I regurgitate T.S. Eliot and Whitman. I learned all those guys. And I was like, well, who's this Vivian Elliott? In the beginning of T.S. Eliot's book, it has For Viv, in all the first editions. And after she gets put away in a sane asylum, her For Viv is gone. And so I was really interested in William Dafoe did this really incredible film called Tom and Viv, which is about this very tumultuous kind of interesting battle, this relationship. And she was born in the 1920s in England. So this is a European woman, you know, British, who's married to T.S. Eliot, who she was his muse. And so I'm I love telling these women's stories about, especially when the men are celebrated in such big ways, when you don't hear about the woman who inspired the man's work. And he would literally take words out of her mouth and use them in his work. Like her insanity, back in the 20s, you ask a question, if I wore my skirt this high, could be put away in the 20s, as a woman. And so the insane asylum really wasn't, really correct. And they were putting women away that weren't crazy. And Vivian Elliott had a really incredible story. So I went I was in London, and I got permission from the Oxford Library. Her work is in Oxford at the Bodleian Library at Oxford University. I got permission to go in and read all her diaries, and her books were left there. And I wrote this piece for Vivian Elliott. So the story that I want to tell, the story that no one else is telling, the story that everybody forgot about, the woman that nobody cares about, and inspired a whole poet's work that is celebrated throughout the world. Who is that girl? And so, so that was Vivian Elliott. There are no asylums for the real crazy women. And that's why I do Betty Davis. And that's, so you want to find the story. And as a journalist, you're always trying to find the good story. And I'm always trying to find the one that, it's been buried. And that's, I think, the journalist in me, and the woman in me, because our voices aren't heard enough, our girls are not heard enough. And so it's important that we let everybody know, that there are there are women out here. There were women who pushed that person into their greatness. There's usually some woman that stood there in that space to make that happen. So
it's hard to describe what makes a compelling story, but you know it when you see it. It's always that thing that you want to tell your friends about. If you read a story in the newspaper and you're on the phone with your mom and you say, "Did you hear about this thing?" That's a great story. If you're walking down the street and somebody does something that perplexes you and you're thinking, "What is that about?" And maybe you dig a little deeper and find out that it's widespread and that it's a trend, that's a story. It's anything that compels your interest. I always tell people to really trust their own instincts, because if it's compelling to you, the chances are it will be compelling and interesting to a lot of other people as well. The one practical piece of advice I'll give them when they're starting out working for an organization, make sure you understand the identity and the personality of the organization you're working for, because every story is not for every organization. So the best way to serve the organization you're working for is to understand the audience they're serving. Don't pitch a story for NPR that is better suited for MTV or vice versa. Make sure you understand what you're dealing with and that you're catering to them.
A compelling story is something that I think touches everyone in a way that it's a universal story. It's something that shows people at the moment of change, pivotal moments. It's a story that engages us in ways that helps to transform us, to make us think how to be a better person, how to do something better, how to be a better family member, and all of those wonderful things. Transformative. That's being the best kind of filmmaker that you could be. Just like there's grammar in composition or in literary terms, there's also the grammar of film. It's something that we know inherently from watching television and movies. We could tell when the end of the first act is coming, the second act, and all of these things. But if you want to become a filmmaker, I suggest take a class, a workshop. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to have a degree in film. But take a workshop, a community workshop or a class, and begin learning the grammar of film. Of what does this mean? What do these colors mean? When you place these two colors together, what kind of feeling does it evoke from you? And so those are wonderful things to learn the tone, texture, and symbolism of film. You just have to have the passion to tell a particular story. And once you get that particular story fleshed out and into a screenplay, then you begin gathering together like-minded people who want to work with you on that particular story. And it becomes a huge collaboration. It's almost like we call it like working with a jazz combo. Everyone has something to add or to take away and this. And then you get together and you work with actors and you work with art directors, and and editors, and you make that particular story, and then as a group you set about marketing it by putting it out in film festivals, by promoting it on Facebook, promoting it on Twitter, and all of these things, and then it just starts to take on a life of its own, and it becomes a wave, a movement, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to be a part of giving birth of to something that came out of your head, you know, and then it takes life and takes you on a long ride, and a lot of people with it. You know.
Part of my job as a film curator, and also when I've appeared on film festival juries, I've watched a ton of films over the last several years, and I think that you really have to be objective, because personal tastes are always, they always get in the way of films that you like, films that you don't like. But I think you have to view films very objectively. Is it well edited? Is it well shot? Is there a cohesive narrative? Is there something new that you're seeing in this film, whether if it's a short or a feature, whether it's a narrative fiction or a documentary? There are always these certain kind of objective criteria that you have to bring into viewing a film. And it's very hard, I find, to kind of put away your personal tastes, because maybe you don't like science fiction, or maybe you don't like the horror genre, or maybe you can't stand romantic comedies, but but no matter what it is, if it is a good film, you recognize it. And I think that you have to walk into every single film screening with new eyes, completely uninfluenced as much as you can be, completely unbiased by everything everything that is in your brain, everything that that you have a personal proclivity for. And what really stands out for me is actually a film that's well made, and a film that is bringing something new to the table, but at the same time, a film that recognizes film history. So it can be something that is completely new, but the filmmaker behind it, you know that this person has seen all the great benchmarks of cinema, and so that's what I always look for when I'm watching a film, sort of that new spark that a filmmaker is bringing to kind of the history of cinema.
In order to have a program on public access, most cities have a public access channel, and the one in Boston, it's called BNN, and they have a website. And the first thing you have to do is become a member of BNN. So you go of your local public access channel. You go to the office or you go online and you fill out a form and you pay the membership fee. And with that membership fee, once you pay, they'll send you an identification card, and then you can use their equipment to start producing your own show. You can use their computers to edit, and you can also run your show on their channel, which means you have to tape your show, bring a tape, bring it down to the studio, and then they play it for you in the time slot that they give you. So it's relatively simple, and anybody can have a show on public access.
If I could give advice to aspiring filmmakers, I would say that to not give up. I think that might sound like a cliche, but people who submit their films to film festivals or film curators, if they don't hear back, they might think, oh, nobody's watching my film. Because I'm certain I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are filmmakers. And I think the biggest fear is that nobody is watching their film. The fear is never that my film isn't good, because every filmmaker, when they pour their heart into their project, I don't think anybody's going to let go of something that isn't good. I think the fear comes from the fact that nobody is watching this, that this DVD is just sitting on a table and somehow it goes by unnoticed. But I think that you have to keep trying, because somebody somewhere will watch your film. And if you're getting no answers, or if you're getting negative answers, it might be because the person who watched your film might not
somehow connect to your film, but the next person would, or the next person after that person would. So it's really about sort of the numbers game, and I know it's really hard because in my department, we have 9 curators, and yet we're always busy watching films because we have a ton of films who come, a ton of films that come to us, and we always watch every single one of the screeners that come through our doors. And even if you don't get a response, it's not because maybe your film isn't good or maybe nobody's watched it. It's because at that point in time, it didn't fit that film festival's mission, or it didn't fit a museum's exhibition's mission. So it's really about kind of keeping on and finally finding the right match for your project. So I think any advice I would give to aspiring filmmakers is really to keep on sending your work out, because if you don't send your work out, then nobody will watch it. And even if it seems like nobody's watching it, even if it seems like you're sending hundreds and hundreds of DVDs out and you're not getting a response, 101, that could be the film festival that will lead you to a wonderful career. And we actually have a film festival at the museum called New Directors, New Films. And this film festival is over 40 years old. It's a joint collaboration between the Museum of Modern Art and the Film Society of Lincoln Center. And through this festival, our curators have discovered filmmakers such as Wong Kar-wai, Pedro Almodovar, Spike Lee. So all these people who were new directors at one point or another, they got a curator or a jury member to watch their films. And so you just have to keep trying, because it does happen.